Hello and welcome back to Mikey's Flightdeck, to the second episode of my top tool series for cockpit builders, this time for making panels. You want to build your own panels for your home cockpit from scratch or modify an existing panel? I will show you my top 5 tools that come in very handy when it comes to building panels. Tool number 5, my hot glue gun. Yes, this isn't the first tool you think about when you start planning your panel project, but believe me, this is one of the tools that I use for every panel I have built until now, and it comes in really handy. When double-sided tape peels off and normal glue doesn't stick, hot glue will. I have used it until now for gluing the annunciators in place or even making strong connections between a screw and some acrylic gears. And the best of all is, I can still remove this hot glue. It gets hard and can be kind of broken away again from these acrylic materials I'm using for the panels. So it isn't a solution forever. It will stick for the time you will need it, and you will be able to lose it again. So think about buying a hot glue gun. Tool number 4, my spray gun. This is a way you can apply color with a clear coat onto your panels. You won't be able to produce such clean results with a brush or a roller. There will be marks left on the panel and you can see it that it is painted. With a spray gun, it will be a flat and clean coat of color, and this is a base that you will need when it comes to engraving the panel. There are some other materials that you will need when you want to work with a spray gun. For example, you will need a compressor to produce the air that you will need for the spraying. But I think when you have a shop and can use a compressor anyway, for example for a nail gun, by the way I love my nail gun, then it could be a good investment for you. You can also buy the colors in spray bottles, for example, but I think not every one of you will be able to get the right colors filled into spray bottles, and this can also be a little bit more expensive than buying the colors in a normal bucket. For smaller parts like buttons, I'm using an airbrush pistol here, and I think you can also use the airbrush pistol alone for making panels if you don't plan to produce very much of them. Then this can be enough for spraying a whole panel. But you can't use normal paint that you can use in your airbrush pistol here. You will need finer paint, and this paint is much more expensive than the normal paint that you can use with your spray gun. So that's the reason why I only use it for small parts here. And you shouldn't buy the cheapest airbrush pistol. I can tell you I have made this mistake, and after the second cleaning process the nozzle here was broken. And for example, this one here is a model that can be disassembled without using any tool, just by hand, and this can be a big advantage and makes your tool much more durable. Tool number 3, a saw. You will need a tool to cut your big acrylic sheets into smaller parts that you can turn into your panels. It doesn't need a big saw for doing this. A small jigsaw will be enough. With a fine blade, for example a metal cutting blade, you can cut the acrylic straight and without any tear out. I'm also using my miter saw for cutting the acrylic. I'm using my jigsaw for making rough cuts through the panels and then making the fine cuts on my miter saw. But not every miter saw can do this. you have to look if your saw can be turned down to a very low RPM. Otherwise you could melt your panel or even damage your saw. Tool number 2, my 3D printer. 3D printing, I think, has brought a boost to the DIY community, and not only for cockpit builders. You can print nearly everything that you can construct in a 3D program, and only your designing skills are the limit for your constructions. But even if you aren't a great pro in 3D modeling, then you will find a wide range of sources for downloading 3D models for your cockpit build. I'm using the 3D printer for printing out knobs and buttons, and sometimes I can use them as they are. I will use the 3D print and build it into my panel, or I'm using it for making a silicone mold and casting more knobs with this with some resin. I'm using a filament printer. It is using a so-called filament, and this is a PLA here in my case. It can also work with ABS or PETG or other materials here, and it is printed onto the printing bed in layers of 0.1 or 0.3 to millimeters. There are also liquid printers on the market that use some resin that will harden layer by layer and then grow out of a liquid component that you use for printing. I'm not too deep in this topic, but just to know for you, this is not the only model that is available on the market. It can also be used for printing different enclosures. I have seen people printing lamps or any other sorts of outlets for the cockpit that aren't not too easy to get in the hardware store. And I have also seen people printing whole panels with it. The backlighting can be a problem then, and also it doesn't come as clean out as an engraved panel, for example. But if you only have a 3D printer, that can be a full solution for you for making all the parts that you need for your panel. Another hint for you: when you are buying such a filament printer, then you should look out for a printer here that can heat up in the bed. This can prevent your prints from warping up when they are cooling, and it can make the printing a little bit easier for you. And my tool number 1 and my absolutely most used tool for making panels, my absolute favorite, my Homebuilt CNC router. I have made this from plywood and the other regular CNC parts like race, motors, electronic and so on. But don't get me wrong, just because it is homemade, it doesn't mean that it's cheap. You will have to spend some money in good rails and electronic, and especially the CNC spindle itself will cost you money. So don't think you can get this for some bucks. But when you build your own CNC, you can save definitely a lot of money compared to a professional built CNC of this size here. I'm using this machine for cutting out and engraving the panels. It can make rough cuts in plywood or MDF, or it can make fine cuts in acrylic and cut out small gears, for example, with a special tool I have made here, a touch plate. The machine can find out how the working piece is aligned here on the sacrificial layer, and so engravings on your panel will be exactly on the place you will need them here. Another advantage of a self-built machine is that you know how to repair it when something breaks here in the machine, and you can build it in the size you will need for your cockpit project. I have made some thoughts about what could be the biggest panel I want to produce, and with these measurements I have arranged here my CNC setup. So now you know my top 5 tools for making panels for your home cockpit. And I hope you get a sense now of what you will need when you think about making your own panels. And if you are already making your own panels for your home cockpit, then write down a comment in the comment section. What are your 5 top tools for making panels? Let the other builders know what could be the tools you would recommend to them. So I will have to move on to my next panel for the next regular episode, and I hope we'll see us soon back on the flight deck.